So on that note, I'm going to hand it over to our next host, Daniel Lynch from EdCast, who's going to now run a session on delivering data-driven learning outcomes. So over to you, Daniel.
Thank you so much. As said earlier, my name is Daniel Lynch. I'm Senior Product Manager for Data Analytics. Today, I've got three wonderful guests. We're going to be talking about data-driven decision making. Excuse me, D3 is a big area of focus for EdCast right now. So I'm going to go ahead and make the introductions. What we're going to do is I'm going to make the introductions for the three panelists. The three panelists will then present their presentations, and then we will allow 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A. So please, if you've got questions, pop them in the chat. I'd be happy to relay those to the panelists or answer them myself or get those questions answered. So thank you for being here. All right, so let's get started. Who do we have here as panelists? Our first panelist is Mike Trusty. Mike joins us this afternoon from the National Capital Region. Mike is the CLO of Fannie Mae, formerly known as the Federal National Mortgage Association. Mike has worked for a lot of blue chip companies in the past, including Bank of America, Rolls-Royce, and Anheuser-Busch. In his current role as CLO, Mike oversees all corporate learning platforms, formulates strategies for training, learning, and development, and disseminates information through technology. He'll be up first to tell us about his efforts, but before that, I'm going to get finished here with the other two introductions. The second individual we have with us today is Kristen Englert. Kristen joins us this afternoon from the Baltimore, Maryland area. Kristen is the manager of learning platforms at Northrop Grumman's Enterprise Talent Organization. Northrop Grumman, of course, is a defense contractor with customers all over the world, dozens of nation states. Previously, Kristen was responsible for Grumman's apprenticeship program, including measuring results and outcomes of those programs. She's currently responsible for content and technology on the learning platform, and she has spent the last 2 years including an initial launch in September 2020 of EdCast within Northrop Grumman, and they're now up to 90,000 users. Our final presenter today is Monica Huang. She is joining us tonight from Paris, France. She is the Danone Academy Director. Prior, she was in HR consulting. She is obsessed with creating value for businesses and people. Danone, as of course you might know, is a multinational CPG firm. Probably have Danone goods in your house right now, whether you know it or not. Monica coordinates across 20 regions and several languages, and she has spent the last 3 years deploying EdCast to 100,000 Danoners. So what we're going to do first is we are going to, I'm going to share my screen here, and Mike is going to take it away and talk about EdCast implementation within the Fannie Mae organization. So let me go ahead and do that.
All right, thanks, Daniel.
Sure.
So let me start. There's there was 3 things I thought I would try to cover today. First, I wanted to talk a little bit about Fannie Mae, talk about our business, and talk a little bit about the business and technical transformation that we have underway. Second, I wanted to talk a little bit about how those business changes are driving a change to our approach to learning. And then finally, to the topic, I wanted to get into how we're using data to really drive the conversation, to make sure that we're aligned with the business objectives and to make sure that we're actually having an impact in the business. So let me start by talking a little bit about Fannie Mae. What we do is basically we're a source of mortgage financing that helps ensure housing affordability here in the United States. As with many financial services organizations, we're going through a number of changes and transformations, digital transformation being certainly a big one. And that's something that has an impact on the skills and the capabilities that we need from our employees in the organization. As we change the technology, as we change our analytics tools, as we change some of the risk models that are a part of that, we have to make sure that our employees have the skills and the capability to be able to do that. So that, Daniel, if you want to move to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about our changing approach to learning. So where do we start? when we started on this, we had business unit learning functions, we had corporate learning functions. We knew that we needed to bring those together in order to really have an impact that created this consistent experience for all of our employees. We also wanted to move away from an event-based approach to learning. This was something that when we started, we focused a lot on learning events. It was something that was very classroom-based. Managers would ask employees or tell employees that you need to sign up for this course or you need to sign up for that course. And that was basically how they thought about learning. It was a little bit disconnected from the true career development that we really aspired to. And it was disconnected from a sense of employee ownership around their learning. We wanted to make sure that we were making learning easy to access. And a lot of this work started before COVID. But certainly we were very happy that it was in place as we shifted from very much an in-person office environment to a virtual environment. So the accessibility of training, bringing training into the flow of work as much as possible was really a big thing that we wanted to accomplish. Another thing that we were doing at this time was changing our jobs architecture, our skills architecture, our talent architecture. We were changing job titles. We were introducing a new skills taxonomy. And this gave us a great opportunity to align this work to the work that we were doing on that side of HR to make sure that our learning really enabled that we were creating the learning paths that really enabled the career development that we aspired to in our organization. And finally, we wanted to create a culture of curiosity, a true learning culture. Like I said earlier, our employees tended to think about learning as an activity, as an event. And we wanted learning to be something that was really intrinsically motivated, that was internally motivated by our employees, something where they were learning things that were a part of their career. They were learning things that they wanted to do, and they really felt a sense of ownership, true ownership for their learning and development. It wasn't something that was where their manager was really directing this. This was something that each employee in the company wanted to participate in. A learning experience platform we felt was a key ingredient to making this successful, and EdCast has been a part of our journey since the start. And happy to say that in July of 2020, we successfully launched EdCast to all of our employees. So let's talk a little bit about, moving to the next slide, talking a little bit about how we measure success. With a change this size, we wanted to make sure that we were defining it in the right way, that we were describing it in the right way, and that we were setting up all of our reports and analytics in a way that would enable us to track our progress and make sure that we could tell the story about that. We started early developing these definitions for what we wanted to do. Josh Beerson, who gave us a great keynote kickoff this morning, we did a lot of research, looked at a lot of his stuff, and found this particular model that you see here that looks at efficiency, effectiveness, and alignment. In terms of efficiency, basically we wanted to find out, are people actually using what we developed? If we launch the LXP, if we launch that to our employees, are they actually going to use it? Effectiveness gets at, does it have an impact? Does it matter? It's great if they use it, but it's even better if it matters and has an impact. And then alignment, we wanted to make sure that we were telling a story in the language of the business. We wanted to make sure that we were aligning with the types of activities that were most important to our leaders, most important to the challenges that they were facing, so that we could start to make the linkage between learning activity, learning programs, and the challenges that they were facing in the business, and hopefully solutions that they were starting to see based on the changes in the capability of our employees. So we use these definitions to configure our reporting. We use EdGraph, and when we started setting up customer reports in the EdGraph environment, we really tried to build them around these dimensions so that at the end we would be able to effectively tell our story, to effectively talk about our progress. So next slide, let's talk a little bit about how we go about sharing the data with our business. Beginning of this year, we started holding quarterly business reviews with all of our leaders, with all of our business executives, our division leaders, and then we have capability academies or schools within Fannie Mae University that we have key leaders that lead those. And so we started holding these meetings, and we wanted a simple framework that enabled us to tell a story and enabled us to have a dialogue with our executives around what we were doing. There's two slides there's two main slides in the deck. Like I said, they're built on this format. One slide is standard. It shows progress for the entirety of Fannie Mae. The second slide gets into some of the details. When we build these, it's a narrative that we build based on a lot of the graphical output from that we get from EdGraph. We start with efficiency. So the first question we want to ask is, if we build it, did they actually show up? Did employees show up? And are they actually doing something? And happy to report that month to month since launch, we see almost half of our employees using the EdCast platform. So we know that they're going there. We also, when we set this metric, we exclude compliance training. A lot of us, any highly regulated organization such as ours is going to have a fair bit of compliance training. And so we didn't want to count that. We really wanted to focus in on the efficiency, the extent to which people are actually using it to develop, and happy to say that they are. The next thing that we wanted to get into is effectiveness. Is the learning actually having an impact? And there's a couple of ways that we wanted to look at that. First, we wanted to look at repetition. If you think about a lot of the neuroscience research or even common sense, repetition is a great ingredient for supporting learning. And so it's great if I go in once, but if I go in repeated times and I start to really develop those skills, really develop those capabilities, that's a good indicator that we're having an impact. And happy to say that of our active learners, about half of them are engaging in the platform within a month. So we're seeing that repetition. We're seeing them come in the door multiple times a month to learn. The second thing was a little bit more interesting. We took a chance and started to look at some of our engagement survey data. And what we found was that our most active learners, the top 10% most active learners in the EdCast LXP, were reporting much higher scores on their engagement survey in terms of how they're able to apply what they've learned on the job. So we're starting to see this trend. We're starting to see this correlation that our active learners are actually seeing opportunities to apply their learning on the job. The last thing really focuses in on alignment and are we getting at the right business priorities. We have, like I said earlier, we've got schools that focus on things like the housing industry, career development. Digital is a big thing for us. Cloud migration with our partner AWS is a big thing for us. So we partnered with them to launch what we call the Cloud Accelerator Academy. And this program helps us get the right level of skills and capabilities in our organization to help with our broader technical digital transformation, with our broader cloud migration. This is a great integration of bringing over learning content from AWS, integrating it with some of our own content to build learning journeys and learning pathways that help our technologists get the skills and the certifications that they need to be successful. This is something where we're also seeing good deployment of some of these people onto AWS programs and squads after they've completed the learning. So we're not just trying to track the learning, we're trying to see where do they go, what do they do after they've completed the program. Overall, I think these data-driven QBR discussions have been very successful. Over the course of my career, I've had a lot of opportunities to present to leaders. It's great when you've got the data in the backup, when you've got the story where you can start to anticipate their questions and really move from just a one-way presentation to having a dialogue with a leader about the capability in their organization, the learning agenda, and what we need to do to make sure that they're successful. So hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully it's been useful. Daniel, thanks again for giving me the opportunity to share some of this with the panel and with your audience today.
No problem, Mike. Thank you for that presentation. You're right on time. With that, we are going to move over to Kristen at Northrop Grumman.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniel. So as Daniel mentioned earlier, Northrop Grumman is a global aerospace, defense, and security company. We have more than 90,000 employees across all 50 U.S. states and more than 25 countries around the world. And really, we seek to solve the world's largest and hardest problems and really discover what's possible. And because technology and our mission is constantly changing, this makes that continuous development and upskilling a key priority for us. Really making those data-driven decisions the best way for us to really maximize our learning and development resources and truly unleash the potential of our wonderful employees. So at Northrop Grumman, EdCast serves as our primary hub for all of that technical, professional, and career development that is available to our employees today. We initially sought out this type of LXP technology to really improve that user experience and make sure that our employees can find all of the resources available to them, and that that's really tailored and personalized to their specific interests and development needs. So while our instance of EdCast is still relatively new, we're about a year into it, we are always leveraging EdCast analytics platform, EdGraph, to make decisions that ultimately drive outcomes aligned to our goals. We use that EdGraph on a regular basis, and in addition to the out-of-box reports available, we've also created a lot of our own custom reports to really make that data and that representation super specific to our Northrop Grumman needs. So today I'll be talking through a couple of examples of data that we've tapped into and how that's actually affected our decision-making here at Northrop Grumman. So since the initial launch of our instance in September of last year, we have initially used EdGraph data to actually inform our communications and change management approach. So communications is always a particularly difficult challenge for Northrop Grumman. And because our initial launch of EdCast included about 90,000 employees, we knew that we needed to do something a little bit different from just the emailing everyone saying the platform was available. We do have quite a few employees that don't have access to their email every day. And, for even some folks that are just inundated with the emails. So when they do get to their email, they really are looking for the content that they're going to care the most about. And we wanted to be really intentional and really make sure we're not just adding extra noise to those employee email boxes. So when we did initially launch, we had our Chief Human Resource Officer send out an email announcing the launch of the platform to all employees. And we did see a big surge. It was about 10% of our audience that logged in as a result of that email. But because that was, of course, a lot lower than we were hoping, we ended up shifting that change management approach to really be more tailored to specific topics and specific interests for our employees. So that, again, it's really pulling them in based on specific resources and not just that kind of blanket email of, hey, here's this new platform available to you. So we do look at EdGraph reports on a pretty regular basis. We'll look at platform searches, channels being followed, employee learning goals, and really use that data to build specific campaigns around those areas of interest so that we're then able to launch these targeted communications. So we're encouraging people to come into the platform and view resources that are the most important to them and that they're looking for. And so it's really giving that in the time of need resources that they're going to be interested in. And we've also found this as a really helpful tool when collaborating with end users and our key content owners. So as we have new channels and new pieces of curated content launching in the platform, we really collaborate with those content owners and those authors to spread their message and, again, just reiterate these new resources that are being included in the platform and targeting those audiences that care the most about it. And then we actually use that data to measure the effectiveness of our different campaigns. So we can, look at the platform activity around the time of launch and see how successful those different communications and those different engagement activities are for pulling people into the platform. So we've had some campaigns where we see a huge spike in new users and activity around that time, which really signals to us that's something we should continue doing. That's something that's clearly grabbing people's attention and encouraging them to come access the platform and check out those new resources. And now that our platform's about a year old, we're also using that EdGraph data to evaluate our existing content vendors. Before we had EdCast, we did not have a single central location where employees could access all of our available content and really search for things across that one single search. And we certainly didn't have a location to pull metrics on engagement through those content sources across all of those different providers. So we use EdGraph to compare usage data across multiple content sources, including our contracted providers, as well as internal content that we've developed here at Northrop Grumman. And we can actually get so granular with that data that we can see that progression of the user experience from when someone first views a card in EdCast to visiting that content source and eventually, hopefully, completing that resource. So looking at those trends across multiple vendors really helps give us that 1,000-foot view of what content is grabbing people's attention, but then furthermore, what are people actually consuming and completing and clearly finding value in? So then by digging into those trends a little bit more, we can dig in and learn more about what we want to. So for example, if we see that there's a specific content source where we have a lot of employees viewing the card and maybe visiting the content source, but they're not really completing that resource, that spurs a lot of questions. And we can use that localized information to do pulse surveys, find out if that's because the content is actually more involved or longer that they're wanting, and they're wanting something more like micro-learning, or they think the content looks great and then they get in there and it's just not really hitting the mark for what they need. So that really gives us the power to better understand if our content that we do have available to employees is or isn't providing value to them. Additionally, we use all of that great data to actually look to see where we have gaps in the content available. So if we see that we have a large user population searching for a specific topic or a specific keyword, but we don't actually have content available in that area, that's a huge signal to us that we need to make sure we're supplementing or bringing in new content to meet that employee need. So by using all of this data available to us, we can really localize those potential issues or gaps and ultimately inform those decisions to make sure we have the content that our employees really need, while also maybe cutting back or removing content that isn't providing that value that we're currently using resources for. So those are just a few examples of how we've already utilized EdCast data to drive outcomes-based decisions here at Northrop Grumman. And we're extremely excited to continue exploring different ways we can use it moving forward. And with that, I will give it back to Daniel.
Thank you for that, Kristen. And last up, we have Monica Huang from Danone.
Yes, so good day and good night or good evening to if we have participants from Europe. So I'm Monica. I actually come from China, but I'm now working as the Danone Academy Global Director based out here in Paris. So here today, the topic we're talking about is something that I think has been daunting the learning professional community for a long time, which is about what KPIs we're using. So before we go to that topic, let me take 30 seconds to share with you what we are doing in Danone. So Daniel, if we can go to the next slide. So we are actually a food and beverage business. So we are headquartered in France, and we have brands, some of them that I think you know them, but you don't know that they belong to us. For example, we have the specialized nutrition business where some key brands are like Aptamil, and also we have adult specialized nutrition brands. And then a big chunk of our business is essential dairy and plant-based. And for example, in US, I think you could find our plant-based products, for example, the brand Silk. And then we also have the business in waters. And we have a global presence of over 100K Danoners all over the world. So that's a nutshell of who we are. And given that, also you will see in some of the discussions we have on learning, we leverage a lot the insights that we take from our actually sales and marketing colleagues to help us construct our thinking. So if we move on to the topic of data, one thing that we are saying, it's learning is to help both organization and people to grow. However, usually when we talk to learning professionals or our learning community around the world, data is not really a very sexy topic. And therefore we really use the metaphor of if we are helping our organization and people to grow, it's like we're nurturing a baby, and you cannot help to grow a baby without checking the weight and height to understand if your baby is on the right track and you're giving the right nutrition to your baby. And that is why we are really keen to look at how we can have the KPIs in place. So we go for the next slide, where here are some KPIs that I think most of our colleagues and peers you must be very familiar with the learning hours, with the learning coverage, as well as the percentage of people with in Danone. We are looking at 24 hours of learning as our internal benchmark. And we are also tracking the learning satisfaction rate and application. However, we think these are as if we are tracking, are we feeding our kids well? Are we giving them the right food and the right meals? But we are not really checking the height and weight. We're tracking really the inputs, but we are not getting the output evaluated. And this is making us go to, and with the launch of EdCast in 2019, with all the data we're able to capture from the platform, actually we are able to do some experiment with big data analysis. And I'm gonna show you what we are right now with our very initial attempt. So Daniel, the next slide, please. One thing we are doing is we are de-averaging learning hours. When we say de-averaging is looking at the correlation of learning hours with other factors. One thing we look into is there a correlation between the number of learning hours people do versus the performance that they are doing? And actually the data analytics tells us we don't see a significant difference. Therefore, the impact is almost close to zero, meaning that the more you put people on learning hours, not necessarily give you a good prediction of this person's performance. And therefore, we say, what is the differentiation point that will be able to give us better effectiveness? And here we are getting a inspiration if we look at different populations. So we compare how our hypos learn versus how the rest of the population learn. So from the chart, you can see that we assign them, they all do digital learning. We put them into face-to-face. The difference is not that much. But if we look at self-directed learning, where here you see a gap. Usually what we see in our data is hypos learn twice as much by themselves, on themselves, versus the rest of your population. And that gives us a good insight into how do we want to construct our new KPI. And here is the next slide, where we have the first MVP of our KPI, which we're calling the Learning Engagement Index. So itself is a composite score. So we are actually taking data from the total learning hours of people, the percentage of self-directed learning, and the interactions the learners are with EdCast. Put all that into the formula, and we then look back into the impact of that to our people's performance. And the result is using the Learning Engagement Index gives us 300% more effectiveness versus we only track or we only monitor the learning hours. And this is quite important because therefore we're able to drive some strategy discussion around this KPI. So Daniel, if we go for the next slide. We're looking now into some of the use cases of the Learning Engagement Index. One thing is that will really help us to understand our learners better. We are now using that, try to create what we call learner tribes, that we are able to position or class the different learners in different tribes. Therefore, we are able to target them more precisionally with precision. And then we're able to engage them more efficiently, devising different campaigns and giving them different learner experience. And this is where we are using it to construct our learning strategy around learning culture. And last but not least, gives us a better standing point when we are discussing with our business leaders in terms of how much we are asking to versus how much learning will be able to impact their business performance. So this is more of a sneak peek into what we are doing. And by the way, tomorrow, my colleague, Frederick, who is our digital learning manager, will be talking more about how we are really doing this in practice. So I'll stop here.
Thank you for that, Monica, Kristen, and Mike. That was wonderful. Okay, we've got about 12 minutes for questions. So I will read the first one I see here. This is a question from Rebecca. The question is to Kristen. Rebecca asks, how do you track and identify missing content from searches performed on the platform? Can you elaborate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we work really closely with our content vendors. They are all really great. And if we send them a list of topic areas or competencies that we want mapped to their content, they do it for us. So if you work with specific e-content vendors, highly suggest you ask them if that's something that they will do for you. Oftentimes they will, and they usually turn it around pretty quickly. And then on the internal content side, if we don't have anything available through our existing vendors or just in addition to supplement that, we'll do a search in collaboration with our learning management system team, as well as if it's a certain topic area. Our team works a lot with subject matter experts across the company. So we just kind of use our internal networks to see what's out there. Hopefully that helps.
Okay, that was actually the only question I had in the chat, but I do have a question for Monica. Monica, I thought it was very interesting about how you pointed out the difference between assigned learning versus self-directed or organic learning, and you found the strongest correlation between a high performer is how much they have self-directed learning. So how specifically did you track that? Did you look for completions in EdGraph? Did you look for organic searches? What was your approach?
We actually, the way we construct our learning on the platform, we do have what we call learning offers dedicated to different functions with the intention to develop their capabilities. And that's where it's more assigned. For example, our marketers, they are assigned to certain marketing learning programs on the platform. And we are tracking the completion of that. Then we have a lot of optional and on-the-shelf content with the vendors or in-house created ones. And then we are able to actually using big data to be able to differentiate how much time people are spending on those versus the assigned programs.
Understood. Thank you. That's very interesting. So I actually don't see any other questions right now. So I would like to thank our panelists one more time, Kristen Englert, Mike Trusty, and Monica Huang. Thank you so much for joining us today. And have a good rest of your afternoon and evening.
Thank you very much.